Good morning, friends. Okay, so in today's project, what we're going to do is we're going to start doing sketches for the yearbook project. So every year, students 6th grade through 8th grade have a chance to be on the yearbook cover. Okay, this is a sample of last year's yearbook cover, a beautiful drawing by my friend Sarah Lagenauer. Okay, so this year our theme is going to be something called Pandemic Strong. Okay, so we're actually incorporating, ideas from the pandemic using songs, and we're going to translate that into an illustration of our yearbook cover. I hope that kind of makes sense, right? Okay, so just briefly, the prerequisites for the yearbook cover are it needs to say Plainwell Middle School and the year, okay? And since our mascot is a Trojan, I encourage kids to incorporate some kind of image of Trojan warriors, okay? Male or female, doesn't matter. And it needs to be in black and white. So what we're going to do today is practice drawing with value, okay? So what you're going to need for today's project is a piece of paper, pencil, eraser, and pencil. Check, check. Okay. I'm going to show you guys how to draw a sphere realistically using value, okay? And I kind of like the idea of value because value translates into an idea of what is it that we value as, a community, right? And value, when we're speaking in terms of art, is all about lights and darks and wrapping those lights and darks around an object to make it feel like it has form, like it's 3D. All right? Okay. So I'm going to tilt my camera down, and we are going to practice drawing a sphere. It's really just a circle, and you're going to shade it so it looks like a ball, right? Okay. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to tilt down my camera so I can see, so I can see my paper properly. This is not been a stellar year for me. Okay, I'm just going to try to get it so you can see it without, sorry. I might have to edit this out. Thank you for being patient with me. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, so you can draw your sphere like freehand, like this. If you decide to draw your spheres freehand, this is how I draw a sphere. It's like a racetrack. I get my hand going in a circular motion, like this. And then I just I press down on the pencil, okay? It doesn't have to be exactly perfect. If you're not comfortable with that, what you can do is, take something that's round and lightly, not heavily, just do a really light line around the sphere so that you have a circle, like that, yeah? Okay. All right, so next what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna try to draw this a little bit sideways so you guys can see. Well, let's see. If I go like this, yeah, that's okay. Let me smush this a little and then I'll move this forward. And again, I apologize, I'm not so great at all this tech stuff. Okay, I'm gonna put a horizon line behind it so that the sphere is not floating. And notice that I put the line up and above the sphere, because if I was to put it like right here on the edge, it would feel like it's a ball balancing on the edge of a table, and I don't want that. I want it to feel more realistic. So start out by drawing your sphere or your circle, and then put a horizon line behind it, okay? I think I'm gonna write some words down too, just so you know. A horizon line is where the sky meets the ground, right? That's how I used to teach it with elementary students, where the sky meets the ground or the wall meets the table, okay? Okay. All right, first, before I do anything, I'm gonna do what we call a value scale. So below this, I'm gonna draw a rectangle like this, okay? This is called my value scale, just like a singing scale, darks to lights, right? Okay, so usually how I do a value scale is I think of it in terms of a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, so 0 would be called the brightest part, and that is called a highlight. Yeah, ADHD. A highlight is like the brightest part of your drawing. It's like if you were looking at somebody's face, it usually is the reflection in somebody's eye. It's like ding, it's like a 0 point, meaning the white of the paper. Okay? And then in the middle, I do what's called a midtone. So a midtone is about half the pressure of the highlight, because when we do value with pencil, we're talking about the pressure of your pencil to the paper. So the heavier the pressure, the darker the value will be. I hope that makes sense, yeah? Okay, and then I'm going to do a 10, which is called a core shadow. And you guys that have had me before, you're probably sick of me talking about this, but if you're going to make something look right, you have to get your scales down. Just like singing, you need to be able to have a smooth transition with your singing scales, right? You also have to, like if you're a band kid, you need to have a smooth transition in your playing scales. Make sense? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my core shadow, like this, and I'm not going to even worry about keeping it in the rectangle box, not so much. What I'm worried about is making a smooth transition. So I'm going to start with my hardest pressure, like this. Right? And really, it's kind of a feeling in your hand. You can feel like the heaviest pressure is the 10, which is the core shadow. And when you go from the 10 to the 5, it's like half that amount of pressure. So you should be pushing like half as hard, okay? Okay, so now you can see it's a pretty smooth transition. To make something look realistic, you really got to get good at making a smooth transition from darks to lights, okay, in your value scale. And then it's just a matter of wrapping that value scale around an object, which is the object today is the sphere or the circle. That's what we're going to do, okay? All right, so now I'm at the midtone, and I'm going to go to my 0. And now I'm lightening it up a lot. And look where I'm holding my pencil. Look how I'm holding my pencil. I'm not holding it like this. No, it's too tight. You choke up back on the pencil a little bit like this, so that you can feel the pencil rest on the paper. It's important how you hold your pencil. You want to hold it kind of midway from the lead to the tip of the eraser part of the pencil, okay? And then now I'm at my 0, and so I just pretty much leave it there, okay? So again, this is called a value scale. And when we do shading, I always like it when my students start with a value scale so they get that scale practice. Just like in singing, I hear you guys down the hallway, right? You're practicing your scales, okay? Same thing in drawing. Check, check. Okay. So now that we've got this done, what we're going to do is take this value scale and wrap it onto this object. Okay, so really honestly, there's no difference between this drawing and this drawing. It's just how the value has been applied. Okay, okay. And so we're going to use the outside edge of the object to show us the direction to shade. And for this, the outside edge is called, and I need to kind of like, I'm going to go like this, contour line. Or edge, it's kind of the same thing. I'll just call it a line for today. Okay. So the contour line is the outside edge of any object, and it's super duper important because why? It shows you the direction that you're going to shade. Like, okay, so this is a circle, right? I wouldn't shade it up and down like this, right? Because I'm trying to give the illusion of it being three-dimensional. And to get the illusion of it being three-dimensional, you have to follow and shade in the right direction. I always say that you should shade in the direction something grows or flows. Like, I always give the sample of like a river, and I'll do it again. So here's my river, right? I wouldn't shade my river up and down like this because that's not the way that the river grows and flows. I shade the direction that the river grows and flows, and the river is flowing, so I use this outside contour edge to shade in that direction. And that's like a big deal. When you're doing artwork and you're trying to make it look realistic, you're trying to fool the eye, right? So when you apply your value, you really have to look at the contour edge to decide which direction that you're going to shade it. Check, check? Okay, so far we've talked about, here's the horizon line, here's the value scale, highlight, mid-tone, core shadow. We've learned on how to make your value scale transition nicely, right? Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about light. And this is a little bit more advanced for my students, but I'm going to do it anyway because I feel like you guys are, you know, you're going to get ready to learn how to draw realistically. I hope you can see this. Okay, let me just, like, all right. I really can't zoom with this camera. Normally with my phone I can zoom, but I can't zoom with this camera. Okay, So you have to think about where the light source is coming from. And for this one, I'm going to have the light source come from this side. So I know that this is going to be light side and this is going to be my dark side. Okay? All right. Okay, so I know that like from here, and I'll just draw a little sun. The sun is shining this side, right? So light side, dark side. Check, check. Okay. So I'm going to start shading on the dark side, and you need to turn your paper so you have a natural bend in your wrist. If you don't have a natural bend in your wrist, you're not going to get the effect that you want, and it's going to feel like you can't shade in that direction, right? You need to feel comfortable when you're shading. I hope that makes sense, right? Okay. All right, so I'm going to start shading in this direction, like this, and I'm going to be talking like the whole time. There's some certain kinds of lights that I'm going to teach you about. I think there's 6 of them. I'm not sure. I'll have to figure it out as I'm drawing. Okay, so notice how like I'm shading using this contour edge, right? But I'm leaving a little bit of white right here. There's something that's called reflective light. And if you ever want to learn how to make something look realistic, like let me see if I can find in Sarah's a little reflective light. This is Sarah's drawing. Okay, so like right here, this is a little piece of reflective light. Light bounces, right? So here's the highlight on his helmet. It comes down, right? It bounces off his shoulder and then it comes back right here on the little edge. And there's a little reflective light right here too. See it? Okay, so learning how to make things look realistic is all about learning how to, bend your shadows, lights and darks with your value scale, and learning how light bounces. Okay, so I'm shading with my hand, comfy like this, like kind of like this. And this little piece right here, and I'll even write it in, that's called reflective light. Reflective light. Okay, right there. Ding, ding. Yeah. All right, so now I'm just going to keep shading and shading, and I know that I have to have this full value range applied here, right? So this is plugged in here using this edge as the direction that I shaded. Super simple, right? Once you get the hang of it, it's like so easy. And here's the thing. A lot of time kids miss up the mid-tone. They go either too dark or too light, and they don't push their value scale so it's a fully developed drawing. In order for it to be like a really fully developed, what we call high contrast drawing, you have to have the range of 10, 5, and 0 applied in this direction on the sphere. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And so a lot of times the mid-tone gets overlooked. All right, so what I do usually and generally when I draw is I kind of start with my mid-tone, and it takes a little bit longer, but it's more finessed, right? So it looks better in the long run if you keep your mid-tones when you start drawing, right? Because if you go too dark too fast, it doesn't have that value scale range that you need. Okay. All right, so I'm still shading in this direction, right? And don't ever shade like this or this or this, because you're trying to give the optical illusion that it's a sphere, right? So I'm always considering the outside edge of my drawing, which is the contour edge. Say it with me, contour edge. Contour edge. Very good. Okay. So I'm always considering the contour edge when I'm shading, right? And I know the sun comes from here and the dark comes from here, so I always start building on the dark side, right? Luke, go to the dark side. I'm building on the dark side today. I haven't had enough coffee. I feel a little flat. All right, so I'm going to be shading. And maybe while I'm shading, I'll talk a little bit about our project. That would probably be a good idea. Okay, so the project is called Pandemic Strong. What I'm going to have my students do this year for the yearbook cover is I want you to think about a song on your playlist that has been like your go-to make you feel better song, okay? And I'll share with mine in the video today which song that is. It's a song by Nina Simone. I love Nina Simone. It's called Feeling Good, right? So what you're absolutely going to do, what you're going to do in the long run is you're going to be illustrating your song, okay? But you're illustrating your song, and you're going to use our images from our mascot, which is, the Trojan Warriors. You can either, if you're a girl and you want to do female Trojan Warriors, that's cool. I'll even show you a little bit. Okay, so let's see who are the winners. Okay, this is Joel. I can't pronounce his last name. Joel. What's your last name, Joel? Joel Schuber. Okay, this is Joel Schuber's drawing, right? Look at his beautiful. Can you see it? Let me do it like this. Oh, and that's actually a picture of them. Cute, right? Okay. So this is Joel's drawing of a Trojan warrior, right? He even did like the lettering in value scale, which is very cool. I like this one a lot. Let me see if I can find the next one. Oh, sorry. I think it's Livy. Oh yeah. Okay, so this is Livy's drawing, and she did like the baby Yoda from the show Mandalorian, I think it's from. And she did include a song in hers, she included a quote from Theodore Roosevelt. Okay, but this year I would like it for the yearbook cover if you did include some kind of words. Okay, so since we are using the idea of the pandemic as our yearbook theme, you're going to think of a song. That's number one. You're going to illustrate the song, and it's going to be, illustrated in black and white using pencil. But I want you to understand how to shade it properly, so it looks more realistic. And I'll upload images for you in Google Classroom on different, images of Trojans, like horses. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm shading. And now I know that I'm coming toward the edge here. So I'm gonna even like light it up just even more, right? So I'm using like feather fingers. Like look how, I've just noticed when I shade and I know that I'm going into my highlight area, I really push back on my pencil, like how I'm holding my pencil. Like, did you see how like from here I was kind of holding it here because I had more pressure and I wanted to have a little more control about it. So I held it, I choked up on my pencil a little bit. But here, in my mid-tone area, now I'm like coming into my lighter area. I'm really, really, really holding my pencil far back. I kind of call it like feather fingers. It's like you're, it should be like as light as a feather when you're holding your pencil, okay? Like this. Okay. And keep turning it. Like again, if your hand is not comfortable when you're shading, how are you gonna do it? You've got to have a hand that's comfortable. Get it? Okay. All right, so let's talk about the different kinds of light we have. So far we've talked about reflective light and highlight. Which is there. Okay, so write these things down. Reflective light is when the light bounces back, right? So like, for example, on Sarah's, the light bounces back right here, and it makes it look more 3D realistic. If you want something to look realistic, you have to understand reflective light. So the thing that I would like to tell you about reflective light is not like a highlight. It's not super bing bright like in somebody's eye. Reflective light is more like a whisper. So I'm just going to kind of rub that back a little bit because I don't want it to be as bright as my highlight. If you have your reflective light as bright as your highlight, it's going to flatten out your object, and you don't want that, right? So a reflective light is a bounce of light, right? And it's not as bright as your highlight. Okay. So now I've got my mid-tone going, and I'm going to write the word mid-tone. And that's in the middle, and I don't want to draw on my object, so I want you to see it through, right? Okay, so now I feel like I can probably start pushing my value scale, and I want this, remember, I want this range applied here. So far, I only have like from here to here. Like you can see, I have my highlight going and I have my mid-tone, but I really don't have a core shadow yet. So what I'm gonna do, I know that I'm gonna leave that reflective light right there, and I'm gonna start building up my core shadow in the direction that it grows and flows, and I'm using the contour edge as my guide, right? Like this. And so you don't want it to look choppy like a paint chip. If it looks like a paint chip, then you're not getting a smooth transition. The trick to drawing something to make it look realistic, like I said earlier, just like if you're a band kid or you're a choir kid, you have to have a smooth transition when you draw so that it feels more natural, right? Okay. And really what you're doing is you're just wrapping your value scale around this object, using the contour edge as your guide. Yeah? Okay. So now I'm just kind of pulling this in. So when I shade, why don't you guys be thinking about, like, what song are you going to illustrate for the yearbook cover? What's your pandemic strong song? I like the way that rhymes. What's your pandemic strong song? Think about it, right? What's on your playlist that has been like something that's made you feel better? Because music is like super powerful. It's a big deal. And if you really want to, have a job in art when you grow up and become an illustrator, a lot of times you're going to have to pair images with either words or music. Like if you go into advertising, songs are used a lot in advertising along, with the images. So they have to kind of go together. It's called illustration, right? You're illustrating. You're making it more powerful than just the words or the song alone, right? They say a picture like is worth 1,000 words, and it really is. It's a powerful image because people, see things, and then they can translate, what the meaning is just by the image alone. But I really do want you guys to get good at starting to make things look a little more realistic using value, right? So value is one of the elements that we're studying, and it's a really important one. Especially since you guys are home right now during the pandemic, a lot of people don't have color stuff that they can grab, to paint with or to draw with, but everybody's got a pencil and a piece of paper, right? Okay, so now you can kind of see that I'm building up my core shadow, and it's taken me like a while. I'm blah 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 blah. I'm like 5 miles long right now talking to you guys, but a smooth transition really is the key, and it might be a little bit boring, but look again how I'm holding my pencil, building up my core shadow in the right direction that something grows and flows. And this is a sphere, so I'm following that outside contour edge. And now I'm really starting to get a little bit darker, with my core shadow. Sorry, I'm checking the time here. All right. That's looking good. And I'm always kind of checking it against my value scale. So I'm checking this against this to make sure that I have the full range. I have that full, 10 pressure to 5, half the pressure, which is the midtone, to like feather fingers, which is like hardly touching your paper at all. Okay. And I'm leaving that reflective light because if you want something to look realistic, it, light bounces when it hits the table. When it hits the object, it bounces off the table, like here's the table, back onto the object. That's called reflective light. Big, big, big deal, right? Okay. All right, so let's talk more about this pandemic strong. So it is the yearbook cover, right? So think about, songs that are absolutely school appropriate. It needs to be school appropriate. You know that, right? Okay. And think about, the images that you can use from the Trojan era. You can use like a horse, the Trojan horse. There's a lot of female Trojan warriors images too. I have one over on my desk that I'll go get from last year to show you. Okay. But I do want it shaded, and I do want a full value scale and a full value range. When I talk about the range, I mean lights to darks, 0, 5, 10. Smooth transition, shaded in the direction of the outside contour edge, okay? That's how you make something look 3D and realistic. And we're going to talk a little bit about foreground, middle ground, background, because when you're making a drawing, you're going to want it, because it's an image of a person. A person lives in a space, right? And the space is indicated by where the foreground is, where the background is, and where the middle ground is. I'm not going to talk about that in this video, but we are going to talk about how you put your person or your image in a space using foreground, middle ground, background. That's going to be like our next video, I think. Okay. Because space is one of the 7 elements that we're talking about today. We're talking about value. Next time we'll talk about space, right? We've already talked about color. Okay, so now I'm checking it, and I'm starting to feel like I do have that full value scale. And like the very last thing I'm going to do, like I haven't even come up here yet very much. I might come up there a little bit more. But I really do want you guys to push your blacks, but do it, smoothly. It shouldn't look choppy, and it shouldn't, look like a paint chip. Okie dokie. Okay. Now I'm going to turn it, and I feel like it's kind of getting smudgy a little bit. So I'm erasing away. And I want to talk a little bit about line. We didn't talk about line too much yet. When an object has weight or mass, and it's on a table, like it's seated on a table or anywhere, like it's on the ground seated, it's going to have a heavier line, and that's called a weight line. Okay. And when an object is hit with a highlight, and you almost want to like erase away that line, that's called an implied line. I'll write it up here. Implied line. Okay. And for you guys that have had me before, you know I've talked about this like over and over and over again, but it's good practice, so I just want you guys to practice using your value, your line, your contour edge. Pull this up a little, and remember, you know, start with your midtone. Midtone gets overlooked a lot. And if you have a good midtone, feels like this is a little smudgy through here. If you have a good midtone, you're going to have a better drawing. Okay? All right. So the last thing I'm going to show you guys is something called a cast shadow. Okay? And I'm going to have to draw over my words a little bit, but I'm going to try not to. So a cast shadow, and I'll just make a short one so I can still keep the word contouring. A cast shadow comes from when the light hits the object and the light bounces off, and there's the reflective light. A shadow is cast. Like if you're outside on a sunny day, right, you cast a shadow. And depending on where the light it comes from, the shadows are longer. So like at noon, if you're standing outside, your cast shadow is very short. And if it's like evening, like 6 o'clock in the evening, your cast shadow is going to be much longer because the light is farther away, right? And this, I think I probably could have a longer cast shadow, but I'm not going to do it because I don't want to mess up my words, because I want you guys to copy these words down. And I'll put them in the description box so you can see it, okay? So this is called my cast shadow. I'll write it right here. Okay, so far we've talked about different kinds of light. We've talked about a highlight, ding, which is right here, right? We've talked about a coarse shadow, right, which is right here. We've talked about our midtone that gets overlooked. Don't overlook your midtone, okay? And make sure that when you're drawing and shading, that you're following the contour line, which is the outside line of an object, okay? All right. We've also talked about cast shadow, which is right here. And honestly, a cast shadow is like, shadows are translucent, so that means that they are a little bit see-through. And so usually when I'm drawing, what I do is I make the cast shadow, first of all, it's got to be in the shape of the object, right? So it's going to be kind of like an oval, kind of like the sphere. It wouldn't project, you know, a square shadow. It would project, you know, the same as the object, so only stretched out, right? So a stretched out sphere is an oval. And I usually like have this darker on the edge and take care so that it's like a really clean edge right here. And don't forget that your reflective light is the key to making things look realistic. That's when the light hits the object, it bounces off the surface, comes back, and leaves a little sliver of light. Not as bright as the highlight, but super, super duper important. Okay? All right. So here, my little drawing is fine. It's no big deal, but it's, you know. So what I want you guys to do today is follow along and do this with me. Okay? Because we're going to take making something like this, you know, which is just simple, and turning it into something like this. There's really no difference between this drawing and this drawing. The only difference is how the value has been applied, and thinking in terms of your lights and your darks and your reflective light. Okay? Let's tilt this little camera back up. Okay, so this is the beginning stage of our Pandemic Strong yearbook cover, and it is a contest. There's 3 winners, first, second, and third, right? Yearbook cover contest, and we're going to be doing it with the theme Pandemic Strong. So I want you to be thinking about a song that makes you feel better, that you've gone to over and over and over again during this pandemic, right? Because words and art go together really solidly, okay? All right. And it's going to be done with pencil, okay? And I do want it to be more realistic. And you guys are in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade now. You're ready to learn how to draw more realistic, and this is the key. Right here, ding, ding, ding. That's the key. Okay? All right, my friends. I will see you so soon, and you take real good care. Okay? Bye.